Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahawashi, Bahasham, Barakahakwadash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahawashi. Double honors to the apostles and elders, the great millstone who ruled and teach well. In peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Ra'aya with another video. And in this video, I'm going to start it off with an article from NOQreport.com titled, "A Top Russian Official Quoted the Book of Revelation to Describe What Will Soon Happen to America." And hey, biblical prophecy just continues to take place right before our very eyes. Apostle Tahar has deemed 2022 to be the year of Yahweh Bahashem Yahawashi, turning things up. And we can clearly see that things have been turning up exponentially. Edomites, or so-called white people from Russia, just continue to make threats of using nuclear weapons towards the West, specifically the United States of America, which is biblically known as Babylon the Great. And according to scriptures, nations like Russia are going to shoot their nuclear missiles onto the United States of America. And it's going to turn the United States of America into the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea, and then a desolate, uninhabitable wasteland afterwards. And as we get closer and closer to that inevitability, just expect to hear more nuclear rhetoric come out from nations like Russia towards the United States of America. The Russians continue to threaten us with nuclear annihilation. Why are so few people in the Western world alarmed by this? Because people in the West are probably some of the, well, not probably, they are some of the most ill-informed and stupid people on the face of the earth. Just look at the culture of these people in the West. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, social media, chasing clout, just vanity and bullshit, which is why these people in the West, especially in the United States of America, deserve to be destroyed. I think it is because our leaders are assuring everyone that the Russians are all talk and that the odds of a nuclear war actually happening are extremely low. And that's not the case according to biblical prophecy. Meanwhile, both sides just continue to take steps to escalate the war in Ukraine. We are engaged in an extremely bizarre game of nuclear chicken, and both sides truly believe that the other side will blink first. And so we continue to creep closer and closer to a cataclysmic nuclear conflict. And once the missiles start flying, there will be no turning back. I simply do not understand why our leaders are not taking Russian threats more seriously. The Russians warned that they would take military action in Ukraine if an agreement to avoid war could not be reached, and that is precisely what happened. And now the Russians are repeatedly threatening us with nuclear war. In fact, Dmitry Medvedev just warned that if the U.S. does not back down, our land will be on fire and the concrete will melt. If the West continues its unrestrained pumping of the Kiev regime with the most dangerous types of weapons, Russia's military campaign will move to the next level, where visible boundaries and potential predictability of actions by the parties to the conflict will be erased, and the conflict will take on a life of its own, as wars always do, Medvedev argued. And then the Western nations will not be able to sit in their clean homes, laughing at how they carefully weaken Russia by proxy. Everything will be on fire around them. Their people will harvest their grief in full. The land will be on fire and the concrete will melt, Medvedev wrote before citing a Bible verse from Revelation chapter 9, verse 18. Now let's go to Revelation chapter 9. And I'm going to start at verse 12. Revelation 9, verse 12. One woe or destruction is past, referring to World War I. And behold, there come two woes more hereafter, World War II, which is past, and World War III, which is coming quickly, and World War III will go nuclear. Verse 13, and the header reads, the sixth trumpet, army from the east. And this is going into that third woe, that battle in the valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon over in that Middle Eastern region, which you can read more about in Joel chapter 3. And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before the Most High, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, Loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And in, I believe, Revelation chapter 16, it talks about how the river Euphrates is going to be dried up. And you can just look up news showing that the river Euphrates has been drying up a lot over the past couple of years. That's because these angels are getting that land ready for these forces, these heathen militaries, to more easily bring down their assets into that Middle Eastern region for the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. These are those mighty ones in Joel chapter 3 that the Most High is calling to come up thither, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, Loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year for to slay the third part of men. And the third part of men are referring to the sons of the wicked, the Edomites, or so-called white people, because according to the scriptures, you have three classifications of men, well, three classifications of people: the sons of God, the children of Israel, the righteous, who are known as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today, the sons of men, the heathens, your Moabites, or so-called Chinese people, the Hamites, or the so-called Africans, the Ishmaelites, the so-called Arabs, etc., etc. And then you have the third part, the sons of the wicked, the Edomites, the border of wickedness, as pursuant to Malachi 1 verse 4, the wicked whom the earth has been given into the hands of in Job chapter 9 verse 24. When these nuclear missiles get to flying, every place where Edomites dwell, where the third part of men, the sons of the wicked, dwell, are going to be hit by nuclear missiles. But the only place that is going to be completely wiped off the face of the earth is going to be the United States of America. And the number of the army of horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the number of them, and that 200,000 is going into 200 million, because the Hebrews didn't have a word for the word million, so they described it as 200,000. And this army of horsemen is speaking of those nuclear missiles. The United States of America is going to get hit by 200 million nuclear missiles, which is going to turn it into the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea, and then a desolate, uninhabitable wasteland afterwards. And that may sound like a ridiculous number, but what you have to remember is that one warhead on a missile holds many smaller warheads, 10, 20, etc., etc. And that's just what these nations say that their warheads are capable of holding. You have to remember, why would you tell your enemy exactly how advanced or how advanced your weapons were, or how truly capable they were? Those warheads, hey, they can hold who knows how many smaller warheads in them. But we just know that according to the scriptures, the United States will be hit by 200 million nuclear warheads. And thus I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat on them, having breastplates of fire and of jacinth and of brimstone, talking again about these nuclear missiles. And the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions, and out of their mouths issued fire, smoke, and brimstone, talking about the warhead on the missile and that destruction it leaves when it detonates. By these three were the third part of men killed, nuclear missiles hitting everywhere the Edomites dwell. Even these Russian Edomites are going to get hit with nuclear missiles. But again, the only place that's going to be completely wiped out is the United States of America. By the fire and by the smoke and by the brimstone which issued out of their mouths. For their power is in their mouth and in their tails. Again, their mouth being the head or the front of the missile, and their tails being that rocket booster on the back of the missile that pushes it to travel to its target. For their tails were like unto serpents, and had heads, and with them they do hurt. And those smoke trails that those nuclear missiles, or just missiles in general, leave behind as they're flying towards their targets does look like the tail of a serpent. So hey, the Most High put the spirit on that Russian Edomite Medvedev to quote scripture. That's because we're coming into the times where these prophecies dealing with nuclear destruction are about to come to their fulfillment. This is 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 10. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise. And in the scriptures, heavens and hell can be symbolic for conditions. When you're in your heavens, you're in rulership, like these Edomites and other heathen nations are in. And when you're in your hell, you're in a low estate. You're in captivity. You're in afflictions, which is what the children of Israel are in right now. But when these nuclear missiles start to fly, that's when there's going to be a role reversal. The children of Israel are going to be in their heaven, ruling in the kingdom of heaven, and you heathen nations are going to be in your hell. The first 1,000 years of the kingdom of heaven in hardcore bondage and slavery, building it up. But after that first 1,000 years, the other heathens outside of the Edomites will be allowed to go back to their lands and live in peace, though they'll still be under the subjection of the laws, statutes, and commandments of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai through the children of Israel. And if they get out of line, they're going to be punished accordingly. But as for you Edomites, after that first 1,000 years, every single Edomite man, woman, and child, young and old, is going to be gathered up and permanently culled from this planet with fire. And what's beautiful about that is that the thing that's going to end Esau's rulership, fire by nuclear missiles, hey, when Esau is completely taken out of the earth, it's going to be fire that's going to do it. And the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up. And what's going to melt the elements with fervent heat and burn up the works in the earth? Nuclear missiles. Back to what that Russian Edomite said. Everything will be on fire around them. Their people will harvest their grief in full. The land will be on fire. The concrete will melt. And the elements shall melt with fervent heat. Concrete, buildings, and these other things out here. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up by those nuclear missiles. And it's not just that Russian Edomite Medvedev that threatened the use of nuclear weapons recently. Just the other day, you had Vladimir Putin say pretty much the same thing. This is a clip from Wyon's YouTube channel titled Gravitas. Vladimir Putin issues nuclear threat, plans Ukraine escalation. And Vladimir Putin issued this threat toward the West, more specifically the United States of America, who they know they're going to have to go head to head with when World War III truly kicks off. And I'm going to start this video at the 1 minute and 59 second mark. And this is a fair use copyright disclaimer. I do not own any of the footage in this video, nor do I stand to gain from it monetarily. It is simply for educational purposes.
Well, it is Putin's determination. The Russian president wants to stand up to the West. Putin's address was singularly targeted at Western powers. He accused the US and allies of blackmailing Russia. The Russian president says the West is trying to destroy his country.
The goal of the West is to weaken, divide, and ultimately destroy our country. The West are saying directly that in 1991, they managed to split the Soviet Union, and now it's time to do the same with Russia.
Putin followed up that statement with some serious charges. He didn't present any evidence, however, but Putin claimed a nuclear strike on Russia will be acceptable for some NATO officials. He also blamed Ukraine for attacks near the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia. Remember, Russian forces are in control of this plant. In recent weeks, the threat of a nuclear disaster there have grown. Russian and Ukrainian forces have been involved in clashes, with both sides blaming each other for an escalation. In fact, just today, Ukraine accused Russia of shelling the plant yet again. The United Nations has repeatedly called for a demilitarized zone there, but no one is willing to back down. And Putin's speech has only raised the stakes as of now. The Russian president reminded the world his country has nuclear weapons too. Listen in.
I want to remind those who allow themselves such statements about Russia that our country also has a variety of weapons of destruction, and in some areas even more modern than those in NATO countries. And if the territorial integrity of our country is threatened, we will without question use all the means at our disposal to protect Russia and our people. This is not a bluff.
And it's mainly been Russian Edomites calling for the use of nuclear weapons and threatening them. And that's not all by coincidence. That's all a part of biblical prophecy, because Russia is going to be the main nation that's going to use their nukes against the United States of America during that third woe, World War III. That's it with this clip. But now I'm going to go to Jeremiah chapter 50, verse 9. For lo, I will raise and cause to come up against Babylon, that virgin daughter of Babylon, Babylon the Great, the United States of America, an assembly of great nations from the north country, speaking of Russia, because what's north of the United States of America, Canada, that Arctic Ocean region, and then Russia. And over the past couple of years, and I've done a lot of videos on it, Russia has been building up its military assets in that Arctic Ocean region, nuclear capable included. And it's a well-known fact that Russia shooting missiles from itself across the Arctic Ocean region, as well as shooting missiles from the Arctic Ocean region to hit targets in the U.S. would be the shortest trajectory time for those missiles to reach the U.S. And that assembly of great nations are not only Russia's allies like China, Iran, or North Korea, but also the allies of the United States of America, such as Britain, France, Germany, these other NATO nations, which at some point during World War III are going to betray the U.S. and ally themselves with Russia to help in shooting those 200 million nuclear missiles onto the U.S. Read Revelation chapter 17, verse 16. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, the 10 horns speaking of the EU or European Union, and the beast referring to NATO, these shall hate the whore, the United States, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire, nuclear fire, and they shall set themselves in array against her. From thence she shall be taken. Their arrows shall be as of a mighty expert man. None shall return in vain. And those arrows are symbolic for the nuclear missiles. Just like how in Revelation chapter 9, it referred to the missiles as horsemen with heads of lions, with fire that came out of their mouth, and tails like serpents. Because when the prophets saw these visions thousands of years ago, they weren't going to say, oh, this is a Satan II or a Zircon hypersonic missile or an ICBM. They described it the best way they could with what they knew during their times. Weapons of war like bows and arrows, spears, javelins, you name it. But now I'm going to jump down to verse 41. Behold, a people shall come from the north country, Russia, and a great nation, and many kings shall be raised up from the coasts of the earth, from the ends of the earth, that assembly of great nations unto the north country, not just Russia's allies, but the U.S.'s own allies that are going to turn against her. They shall hold the bow and the lance, and what a bows shoot, arrows, the silos and other launch platforms for these nuclear missiles. They are cruel and will not shew mercy. Their voice shall roar like the sea, and they shall ride upon horses, everyone put in array like a man to the battle against thee, O daughter of Babylon, the virgin daughter of Babylon. And when you go to Psalms 137, it equates the Edomites to being the daughter of Babylon. I believe it's Psalms 137. You can read verses 7 to about 9. But now I'm going to jump up to verse 50. As the Most High overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah and the neighbor cities thereof, and ancient Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed by fire and brimstone from the sky. And besides being known as Babylon the Great, or the virgin daughter of Babylon in the scriptures, the United States of America is also known as spiritual Sodom and Egypt, as pursuant to Revelation 11 verse 8. And it's very easy to see why the U.S. is known as spiritual Sodom. This is the #1 nation that pushes the alphabet lifestyle, beginning with LG onto the rest of the planet. What did you have in June? Pride Month. And I just saw a clip that a brother posted showing that now they've got baby, how can I describe this? Baby insertables that a TATRANS woman can insert in his rectum and then push it out to simulate that they're giving birth. Just complete madness, saith Yahweh. So shall no man abide there, neither shall any son of man dwell therein. The Most High is going to overthrow this modern day Sodom and Gomorrah with modern fire and brimstone, those nuclear missiles. And as it says, neither shall any son of man dwell therein. After those 200 million nuclear missiles turn this place into the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea, and then a desolate, uninhabitable wasteland afterwards, man, woman, or child will never set foot on this place ever again. And after a time, only desert creatures are going to dwell here, as it says in verse 39. Therefore, the wild beasts of the desert with the wild beasts of the islands shall dwell there, and the owls shall dwell therein, and it shall be no more inhabited forever, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. And the former United States of America, the daughter of Babylon, spiritual Sodom and Egypt, is going to stand as an eternal memorial as to what a wicked kingdom looked like, how not to govern the earth, and what the judgment and punishment was for afflicting the apple of the Most High's eye, the children of Israel, who are again known as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today. So that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong, as we can clearly see, we're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites, mainly from the United States of America. So as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shalom. Hey, Shalom Akim. As soon as I finished this video, I read this article, which I just had to put at the end of this video, just to further show how the Most High is putting that spirit on those Russian Edomites to make threats in using their nuclear weapons, and how, as we went into with this video, the Russians will use their nuclear weapons on the West, specifically the United States of America. But this article is from BusinessInsider.com. Russian state media airs lawmakers' threats to nuke Britain and Germany. A Russian lawmaker threatened Britain and Germany with nuclear strikes on state TV. The host suggested that Russia should have hit the Queen's funeral, taking out many heads of state. Russia's recent battlefield losses have renewed the question of whether it would resort to nukes. And that's just some more propaganda from Western media outlets, because if you're really paying attention, Russia is clearly winning that conflict in Ukraine. Russian state TV aired several threats by a lawmaker to make nuclear strikes on Britain and Germany, with the host suggesting that Russia should have struck the Queen's funeral. Andrei Garulyev, a member of the State Duma and a retired major general, suggested the strikes on Sunday and Monday's edition of the pro-Kremlin talk show 60 Minutes, according to clips translated by the Russian media Monitor. 60 Minutes is a vehicle for pro-Russian propaganda and frequently airs misleading and false information, so-called, about the war in Ukraine. Garulyev, a pro-Russian President Vladimir Putin lawmaker, suggested on Monday hitting Germany's Ramstein air base. But he took particular issue with the UK, calling it the root of evil and a place Russia could turn into a Martian desert with nukes. Host Olga Skabeva then quipped, "We should have done it today. All the best people are there for the funeral," she said. From Julia Davis's Twitter page. Meanwhile, on Russian state TV, State Duma Deputy Andrei Gurulyov threatened Britain with nuclear strikes. Host Olga Skabeva said that Russia should have conducted a nuclear strike on Monday since many important people were in attendance for the Queen's funeral. World heads of state, apart from a few pariah leaders like Putin, gathered in London's Westminster Abbey on Monday for the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II, a few hours before the 60 Minutes broadcast. Whether Skabeva was joking or not, Gurulyov used the same reasoning he used on Sunday. President Joe Biden would not retaliate to a nuclear strike on a NATO ally. Meanwhile, in Russia, more of the usual. Nuclear threats against Germany and Britain, cautioning NATO against going into Ukraine. This directly clashes with their lies, constantly spewed by state TV, that Russia is already at war with NATO and uniformed NATO troops are in Ukraine. Gurulyov on Sunday said Germany should understand that if there's a strike against the decision-making centers, the main decision-making center is Berlin. He said Russia should call Biden's bluff, saying Biden would not follow NATO's Article 5, which considers an attack on one member state to be an attack on all. If we turn the British Isles into a Martian desert in 3 minutes flat using tactical nuclear weapons, not strategic ones, they could use Article 5, but for whom? A non-existent country turned into a Martian desert? They won't respond. It's not the first time 60 Minutes guests have advocated nuclear warfare, though it's unclear if Russia would take such a step, and Gurulyov is unlikely to have the power to instigate it. So again, these Russian Edomites are talking big shit and making threats towards the West and using nukes, which they will use those nuclear weapons to turn the United States of America into the biblical lake of fire, as well as that desolate, uninhabitable wasteland. Shalom.